This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. The maze is our journey through life, and we really can't avoid it. We're going to go through it no matter what, but we're going to sort of help you understand that when you get to that, what you think is a dead end, you have options. Now you've got to challenge yourself to move forward. And my guest today is Kellan. And I'm going to let you pronounce your own last name because I don't want to mess it up.
That's not unusual. It's flukiger, very complicated. Flukiger.
Oh, okay. Well, Kellan, when I read your bio, you've been through a lot in your life, but now you are out there helping millions of people. And the question is, how do you go from being down and out of your luck and now like the phoenix behind you rising from the ashes?
It's a journey. It's a journey, and it's a choice. And it's founded. These are things that I've learned in the last 16 years. The first 52 years of my life up to 2007 was nothing like what I do now and have been doing for the last 16 years. I had a corporate career and big success and all that sort of stuff, but I also struggled with mental illness, with depression, with self-sabotage. I've ruined several careers and et cetera. And in 2007, I started over and decided I was going to take control of my life and make some different decisions. Well, I'm 52 when that decision was made. So it wasn't like I started young, I started old. And now I'm 68. So in the last 16 years, 16 and a half now, I have dedicated myself to personal growth and improvement and to being of as much service as I can. And so the 50 million number was kind of interesting. A couple of years ago, my year starts October 14th.
Okay.
And there's a whole story behind that, which maybe we'll get to and maybe we won't, doesn't matter. But anyway, a few years ago on October 14th, I decided, I want to help a lot of people. And I picked a number, 10 million. And I don't know why, I just felt intuitively to do that. And so I thought, how will I do that? And I have a podcast also. I'm up to almost 900 episodes, and I have an LA Talk Radio weekly show that's live. And I had a television series and working on season 2. And I speak at a lot of conferences, and I've written 19 books, and every way that I can think of to reach out to people. So I thought, all right, I got to do all I can. So I've been on like 400 and something shows, et cetera. But anyway, near the end of that year, in September, because remember my year ends in October, I was on somebody's show and we talked for an hour. He asked me about my story and some of the same things we'll talk about. And I told him about the 10 million, and he stopped me and he said, "You need a bigger number." And I said, "Okay, why?" And he said, "We've been on here for an hour." And he got emotional. He was crying at that point. And he said, "You have changed my life. You need a bigger number. I'm going to talk to 1,000 people myself this week. You need a bigger number." So and I didn't really know tracking it that year. So I just had said it. And so anyway, when the year came around in October, we set a bigger number. We said, okay, 50 million. And then we thought we need to figure out how to do that. So we doubled down on everything we were doing. And then we started tracking audiences, how many people we reached, because I didn't ever really expect to get 50 million emails that said, "You helped me in some way." I didn't expect to do that. But anyway, it turns out that in that year, our audience reach in all the places we worked was 75 million. So we made that goal. And that year ended this last October behind us. Now, what I mean when I say help people, I have a very specific thing. The experiences of my life have led me to know that every one of us is a beautiful, divine, capable person. We all have our hardships and struggles, but we live in a context straitjacket, and we live far below our capabilities. And my message is, what if we didn't? And what can I do to help you? What can I do to help you take off the straitjacket, to love yourself, to acknowledge who you are, and then to create from that infinite possibility? So that's the message of everything that I do. And now that we started a new year last October, my mission this year is 250 million. And I have no idea how we're going to do it, but I'm all in and I'm doing whatever it is every single day. So that's the story of the numbers.
You know, what I love to hear that whether you are male or female, we all hit a time in our life when we stop and say, what was I doing wrong? Because I don't feel right at this moment. How do I feel right going forward? And I know I went through that as well about 15 years ago. I was working a job that I loved, but I hated the culture. And the culture did not like me because they saw that I was succeeding, but not the way they wanted me to. And so we were constantly butting heads. And I didn't realize I was depressed till one day my son was driving me home from work and he said, Mom, when are you ever going to be happy again? And it was like, well, I am. And he said, no, you're not. He said, you are not a happy person. And so I started feeling sorry for myself initially. Ugh, why aren't I happy? What can I do? You know, and I came home and I asked my husband to make me happy. And he looked at me and he said, do you want me to buy you flowers? Do you want me to take you on a vacation? And I kept saying no, because that's not what I wanted. And then I was sort of pushed out of my job. And the day I got pushed out of my job was the day I said, I know what I really want to do. And I didn't know the first thing about podcasting, but I said, I know how to use a computer. I know software. This is what I'm going to do. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to tell somebody I was going to do something and think that they would laugh at me or tell me I couldn't do it. And it almost sounds like that's sort of where you got to. All that stuff in the past finally said, hey, I'm smart. I can do something.
Well, it is. My transition was abrupt and dramatic, and it came out of my decades of depression. I was raised in a regular two-parent home, but it was fanatic in religion, and so I had discipline that today would be felony child abuse, and I grew up believing that I was a failure and I always would be, et cetera, et cetera. And so I spent the first 52 years of my life trying to prove that I was okay. And I thought if I made enough money and had positions that that would be okay. But the truth is I was not happy. I never was happy. I struggled with depression and self-sabotage. I mean, I trashed different jobs. Big success, like clear up into the C-suite in the United States and Canada, and I trashed it over and over again. And finally, in August of 2007, I had a divine intervention, which was literally a couple of things that happened that were two by four spiritually upside the head that invited me to change. So I walked away from a 30-year career at the top of the game. I was back up, even though I'd trashed a bunch of them, and started all over again. And without any clue of what I was going to do. But I knew that I had reached a point of, this has to change or I'm dead. I mean, I'd literally attempted suicide 2 weeks before that had happened. So I started over and gradually got healthy myself, got the help I needed for the first time in my life. I realized that in my own journey of healing, that the best thing I could offer in the world was support and help to others who are trying to figure out who they are, who have been duped and deluded by the idea that there's a box and they need to fit in it and do the thing, and they don't want to and don't feel good about it, and to help them create life like they want. And so, yeah, it was abrupt, it was sudden, it was scary because I had no idea what I was going to do, and I literally walked off into the sunset to start life over again in October of 2007. And now here, 16 years later, I have a coaching practice around the world. I've written 19 books. I have 90 songs on all the commercial outlets. Some of them tell stories. I've been in a group that charted #1 on Billboard 3 times, blah, 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 blah. But it's because I finally said, enough, I'm going this way.
Well, and you finally said, hey, whether it's 52 or 42 or 82, I don't know how much longer I have, but if I'm going to live, I want to live at the best that I can live each day. And I know there are days that you wake up and I wake up and it's like, looks like it's not going to be such a good day. But then I turn that switch on and I go, wait a second. Why isn't it? What can I do? Even if it's only for a minute today to make it a good day. And those are things that I didn't think about in the past. And so my question to you is, because so many of the individuals that I have on this program, we've all hit that downward spiral, that depression. Do we really have to hit rock bottom before we can finally take care of ourselves?
No, many do. It's not a requirement. Uh, Sometimes it takes something abrupt and difficult before we have the courage to do things that have been percolating in our minds. We've thought about it, we've wanted it, we sort of think it, we've dabbled, and often it takes some, good smack, but it doesn't have to. The right to choose, you just described it really well. Like we create our day. I don't care how we wake up, wrong side, right side, upside down side of the bed. You get to decide, and so do I, each of us, how we're going to approach each situation, how we interpret things. So I have a morning ritual that's like 2.5 hours long, and I call it my daily warm up. I create me for the day exactly like I want, no matter what's going on around me. I don't care. And that way I get to meet you here. And I just met a lady before this morning, who I'm going to share a stage with in August in Phoenix at the International Association of Near-Death Studies. They're having their annual meeting in Phoenix, and I've been asked to speak because I died once, and so did she. And we're following each other, and so we were meeting ahead of time just to get acquainted. And what an amazing woman! But and I saw in her story, every one of us, we get to create our lives. We just don't know that. And we don't do it. And we don't exercise that creative option. We think that we're locked up, and we're not.
Well, and so many from our generation, we were told who we were going to be when we grew up. And some of us believed it and followed that path. I know I got very ornery when my parents said, well, you're going to go to college and you're going to get a teaching degree. And I said, no, I'm not. And they said, yes, you are, or we're not paying. So for the first 2 years, I studied communications. And little did they know that when I invited them to come pick me up, I said, there's a graduation ceremony because I have an associate's degree in communications. And with that, my parents said, very good, we're going to pack your bags. You're not coming back next year. Because to them, I needed to be a teacher. That was going to be my security through life. Both my brothers did very similar things along the path. But what we found out as we got older, our parents actually loved us even more for being the people we turned out to be. But as we were growing up, all we could hear was, this is what you're going to do. This is the kind of money you need to make. This is what's going to make you happy. And when I told my mother right before she passed away that what made me happy was being fired from a corporate job, having to make a change, completing my college degrees, and podcasting. And she said, are you a famous broadcaster? And my comment was, I'm the most famous broadcaster in this house. And I'll tell you, that changed me. I don't have to wait for my listeners or somebody else to tell me if I'm good or not. If you don't feel good, you're not going to come across well. And it seems like that's what you also learn. You have to take care of you from the inside out.
I couldn't agree with you more. You are the loving. People think it's selfish. Loving yourself furiously and fiercely, and being kind and forgiving and generous and compassionate to yourself is the highest form of worship of the divine. Like he created you, and he did it lovingly and intentionally and perfectly. And yeah, we all have flaws and busted stuff. Yeah, whatever. But that's all true. And the idea that you're somehow supposed to neglect that, whether it's spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally, it's just not true. And you can't do very much in terms of adding good to the world and loving and supporting others if you're broken. You can't serve from an empty cup. You can't help from an empty vessel. I mean, there's 100 sayings about that. So, yes, honor and love yourself. And that long ritual that I talk about every morning is about that. It's about spiritual, physical, emotional, mental preparation so that I meet my day all in every day.
So you said that you had a near-death experience, and there are many people out there who are going to say, "Oh, yeah, that was just a dream." But there's a reality to it, a real reality, and it's your reality. How did this all come about?
Well, 11 years, I told you there was a divine intervention that slapped me around in 2007 that invited me to change. So I accepted that, started life over again, and was doing very well. And in 2018, which is now 6 years ago, in fact, 6 years ago next month, I contracted a fatal illness. And it's funny because that person that I was just talking about also happened to be a healthcare practitioner. And because we're speaking at that conference about dying, she asked about my story as I did hers. And I told her what had happened. And I told her what the disease was that I had. And her eyes got big and she said, "You're dead. Like you're dead." And so this is to address the not real part. Anyway,
Right.
so I was in the ICU of the University of Alberta Hospital here in Edmonton, Alberta, and I had a fatal illness. I had necrotizing MRSA in both lungs and in my bloodstream. And that the 10-day kill rate of that disease is 100%. So I died. I flatlined. In that process, when I flatlined, I was dead. I sat up. I was on a stretch. I was on a bed in the ICU. But I sat up and the room had changed. It wasn't full of tubes and people anymore. It was a sort of gray. And the walls were kind of photo card gray, right? And so I couldn't really see how big the room was, but as I sat up, I could see a doorway over my left shoulder. And I wanted to be at the door for some reason. So then I'm suddenly standing at the door and I'm leaning on the door jamb on my right shoulder. And there wasn't a door in it. It was just a doorway. And on the other side, I noticed that it was white on that side and gray on my side. The light wasn't streaming through or anything, but it was white on that side and gray on my side. And on the other side of the door, there was somebody leaning on that door jamb, like, right across the doorway. And looked at me and he said, "Do you want to come home?" And in an instant, I would have said heartbeat, but my heart wasn't beating. In an instant, I knew where I was, who I was talking to, what the question meant, what the door was. And so we chatted for a while about what I'd been doing since 11 years before, my work and everything else. And finally I said, "Well, I'm not done yet." He said, "Okay." And that was the end of that conversation. I'm sure that's when they were able to restart my heart. The next day, and I ended up being in a coma for 17 more days before I was even awake enough to be on the road to recovery. But anyway, the next day, we were back at the door, and people always ask, "How did you know it was the next day?" I don't know. It was the next day, okay? So I'm standing at the doorway, same thing, and the subject of the previous day didn't come up because that was decided. And so he said, "All right, so if you're going to stay, what are you going to do?" And I talked about the coaching that I was doing and the books that I'd already written. So we talked more about all that stuff, about what I could do. And then after we talked for a while, I had an experience. I don't know. Have you ever seen that movie Contact with Jodie Foster? It was
Yes,
made in the 80s.
Yep.
Okay. I use that because that's the only thing I've ever seen that has a scene in it that reminds me of what happened. I felt like I was taken on a trip through the universe. And the intensity of that was such that I felt like I was in a protective bubble. And if I hadn't been, I would have been incinerated by the energy and the process. And I saw and heard a long time, just everywhere, glorious and fantastic things. And went on and on and on, and I felt like I was being fed with a fire hose. When we got back, I'm breathless, but we're back at the doorway, and I knew for sure four things. Thing number one is each one of us is a divine, intentionally, lovingly created being, period. Number two, we each had a mission and purpose that we not only agreed to, but we were stoked about before we came. Number three, we were given the gifts and talents we need to both do it and enjoy it. And number four, all the help we need is available from both sides of that door. So I said, well, since that's true, why do we settle for crumbs? And I don't know if in the economy of heaven, brevity is a virtue, but the answer was four words: because you don't believe. Duh, right? I didn't facepalm. I thought about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I said, okay, well, what can I do? Oh, glad you asked. And so then some more information came that I wrote in a second book. I wrote a book called Meeting God at the Door, and I wrote a second book about this framework that I was given about how to change these limiting beliefs. That's called the Book of Context, because we live in what I call a context straitjacket, right? So that was the end. That conversation was, I don't know, it felt really, really long, but obviously time has no meaning there. So I have no idea how long it actually was. The last conversation, the third one, was on the following day. We're back at the door, and that day I'm just excited. I'm jumping up and down like a person on one of those bouncy balls sitting at a desk, right? I felt like that, and repeating everything that we talked about, and it was all excited. And the third conversation was one question again. He looked at me and he said, "Are you sure?" And I felt like I'd been sucker punched. I thought, what do you mean, am I sure? Am I stupid? Am I missing something? Like, hello? And so we talked about it, and I asked all those questions, and I felt reassured and everything else. So I said, yeah, I'm sure. And nothing was said, but that conversation ended with a finality that I just knew we were done. And then I was in a coma for another couple of weeks plus. When I came out of the coma, I'd lost 35 pounds. My body was completely destroyed. I couldn't walk. I couldn't anything, combination of being in a coma and having that massive infection. So then I gradually healed, and it was a miraculous release from the hospital, and the rest of the details are in the book. But that's what happened. And
so what you're saying is that it's all about, we need to believe. And I feel that all the time. If you believe enough in yourself, in what you're doing, you let it out and it will come to you. But the problem is that we all think that success, whatever that is this big fancy picture with a bow on it. And success is different for all of us. You know, I had somebody who contacted me a couple weeks ago, and he said, Karen, your podcast should be doing so much better. And your coaching, you should be, making X amount of money and all this. And I said, I'm happy with what I'm doing. I am. I said, I know if I wanted more, I could push for more. I could let it out there. But this is what I want. I said, so my success is what I have. Somebody else's success may be bigger, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we can't compare, oh, your success is this high and mine is only that high, then mine's better than yours. And it's not. It's what we believe in.
I love that, because we have a warped view of that sort of stuff anyway. We are indoctrinated, and I worshipped at the altar of money for all those years. I mean, I had big shot positions, corner offices, and everything else. And you know what? I was miserable. I was a drug addict, and I tried to kill myself. So the picture of stuff has nothing to do with anything. Are you doing the thing that your gifts and your talents call you to do? Are you adding good to the world? We're built to love and serve each other. And the way you do that and the way I do that is the way it is. And it has nothing to do with the make and model of car, whether or not I have a boat, the size of a house, or any of that. That is so useless. in the context of adding good to the world. I mean, money's fine. I make lots of money. And you know what? I don't care. I use it to reach more. I use it to do what I'm doing. I am thrilled out of my life. I have this thing on the screen, Your Ultimate Life, a life of purpose, prosperity, and joy that you create by serving with your gifts. That's the measure of happy. Why do you think so many celebrities and people that have all that picture of whatever are in rehab, busted, commit suicide, and everything else? Because that isn't happy.
Right.
That is just stuff. Like we came into the world with nothing. And you know what? We're leaving with nothing. And the only thing we're going to take with us is what we've made out of ourselves. That's all.
You know, I
And
learned this
so
lesson.
that's where it is.
Yeah, I learned this
Go ahead,
lesson a
sorry.
long time ago. My brother moved out to California in the late 60s, I think it was. He wanted to be in the music industry. He got into the music industry. He rubbed shoulders with all these wonderful celebrities. And it used to like make me jealous. And I remember I called him one day and I said, "How do you do it?" He said, "I just do it." He said, "But that's not who I am. Who I am is the music I'm producing." He said, "It's not about the people." And I didn't believe him at first. And then about maybe about 15, 20 years ago, he moved to upstate New York. And he's still doing music, but he's doing it on a much smaller scale because that's what he loves to do. That's who he is. And he may have Grammys and he may have Tonys sitting in his house, but he said it wasn't about that. In fact, I could have cared less if I would have won them. I won them. They're part of who I am, but I love music. I love working with artists. And that's when I realized I spent a long time of my life trying to be jealous of somebody who really knew how to be happy. So that all started to click for me as well. It's not about who you know, it's about how you know yourself and how you project to others.
I love hearing that story because I love music also. I've owned a recording studio for 40 years. I've worked with a whole bunch of different people, and I have a whole bunch of original stuff on all the commercial platforms for exactly the same reason. A lot of them, I mean, different genres, but a lot of them tell stories from the books I've written about depression and recovery and struggle and resilience. And I even wrote a couple books about the death experience. And, you know, it's about expressing a message, and the message is love and hope and progress and growth and using your talents and all that good stuff. So good for him. I'd love to meet him. That would be fun.
I know he would love to meet you because Rising from the Ashes, I think, is it's more than just a story that's been out there. It's real. And so many of us have done it. And we're not over it because we're still on that journey of life. We're still going to come up against, the obstacles in life. But now we have more tools that we can use to help get us through some of those things. And we've heard from other people how they do it.
I love it. Yeah, I'd really appreciate that if you'd introduce us afterwards. I didn't know about that, and now I'm excited. Yay!
I absolutely will. So tell me a little bit about
Stoked.
your podcast, because I'm sure our listeners are saying, okay, you have a podcast, Kellan, what is it like?
So the name of the podcast, the name of all of them, I have a podcast, as I mentioned, it's called Your Ultimate Life. And it's funny how it started. At the beginning of the pandemic 4 years ago, someone called my wife when the word lockdown was first spoken, and that whole thing scare started. Called my wife and said, "Does Kellan have a podcast?" Because they were looking for something, motivational stuff to listen to or whatever, and we didn't. And she said yes, and so she came downstairs and said, "We have a podcast," and so I created it. It's called Your Ultimate Life, and it's about creating a life of purpose, prosperity, and joy by serving with your gifts and talents. And it's about the truth that you can have that. And I have solo episodes and interview people, but it's all about sharing the stories of how people have made a choice to add good to the world in spite of their hardships, to help them spread their message. Because my 250 million isn't just my message. If I can help somebody else spread their message of hope and resilience and capability and creation, I'm all in. So that's one thing that I have, and the name of it is Your Ultimate Life. And like yours, it's on all the platforms. My other thing is I have an LA Talk Radio show, which is on Tuesday afternoons in LA, and it is live, and it's the same name, Your Ultimate Life. LATalkRadio.com if you want to go there, and you can find that show too. And it's for exactly the same reason. It's just some of the same guests, different guests, but it's about how to create a life you love. So you get up every day and you love it, and you're there because you want to be it, and it's all good, et cetera, because that's all possible. And we live in this illusion that it's not. So that's the whole purpose of those two. And there's other stuff going on too, but those are the two big ones.
Well, you've got both of those. You've got your books. You have your website. We're going to make sure all that's in the show notes, because I know what happens when you listen to a podcast. You forget certain things. Well, everybody, it's in the show notes. If you don't find it in the show notes, all you have to do is contact us at New Cleveland Radio. We will make sure that you get the information, because I will tell you, and I'm going to be honest, it was difficult for Kellan and I to get our schedules together to get him on. There was some miscommunication. And then yesterday, my computer died. And as I told Kellan, the way we fixed it, we put it in the refrigerator for 45 minutes, and now it's working again. Maybe it had a afterlife experience or something in the refrigerator. I don't know.
It had it had a fever.
Yeah.
Your computer had a fever and you fixed it.
But it's working.
I said that when you were telling me ahead of time. I never heard of that kind of computer repair. That's funny. So good for you.
Well, it was hysterical when they suggested it to me, because I really thought it was a joke. And I said, "You mean you're not coming out to check it?" He said, "I'll be out there if you need me." And so obviously he knew what he was talking about. And so we're up and working, but everything is backed up on another computer right now, so we don't have to worry about that in the future. In the meantime, Kellan, thank you so very much. We will be in touch, and I'll send you the information on my brother, and the two of you can have a conversation. That would be great.
Thank you, Karen. I want to honor you. Doing a podcast is a labor of love, and I know that it's something that you feel called to do, and I'm grateful to you. Grateful for the good that you're doing, grateful for the interviews you have, grateful for having me on the show, and for the positivity and opportunity that you're bringing to your guests. So I honor you for that, and thank you.
Well, thank you, and keep up the good work, because it is your ultimate life. Have a great day. Bye now.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.